Welcome to Women Express. I'm Denise Harrington, and along with me, Nia Harrington, we are the hosts of this wonderful program whose focus is on women, their voices, their position, and being able to just stand up in our world and make a difference. Today, we are really lucky. I feel very lucky to have Vera Cherepanova. She is a master of a lot of different trades, which are important for women. She's the executive director on the Boards for the Future. She leads a global nonprofit organization advocating the greater representation of risk, ethics, and compliance professionals on corporate boards, which also includes women. Yippee, something we're going to talk about. She's a founding partner of Studio Etica. Is it Etica?
Yeah, I think that's Etica.
Runs Etica and runs a boutique consultancy advising companies worldwide in corporate ethics and compliance programs. And boy, compliance these days, woohoo. She serves as an advocate also on an advisory council and Ground Truth Intelligence, a global due diligence platform. There's a lot of due diligence going on. It's pretty cool. She's an author, thought leader. She's a dynamic media presence. She's a columnist at the Corporate Compliance Insights. And she's a great speaker. She speaks globally on topics, keynotes, workshops, and major institutions like World Bank. And she's recognized as a thought leader in risk management, compliance, and corporate governance. Well, why us? Why is she with us today? Because this compliance has a lot to do with whether or not women are rising in the ranks to be a part of compliance on corporate boards. So we're asking her to narrow her focus just a tad. Seems like it all rolls into one. But we want to know what's going on the board level. What is it that's happening with women? Because we bring a different perspective to the table that may be being left out in this day and time. And we want to know what are the new trends when it comes to women in the corporate arena. So welcome, Vera. It's been a moment. I think we talked in before April.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Yeah, that was a wonderful introduction that puts kind of a lot of pressure to perform, which is good, I guess. I'm happy to be with you guys today. And indeed, I think what I'm doing in a risk, ethics, and compliance space is very closely connected to your agenda around women leadership, because according to different estimates throughout the years, these estimates have confirmed that at least 60% of compliance professionals are actually women, right? So when we talk about our targets and our goals at Boards of the Future, which is increasing the representation of ethics, risk, and compliance professionals on boards, that basically means that to a major extent, we are creating a movement to promote women simultaneously with hitting that agenda, right? So for boards, I think, at least from that perspective, having women and more women is a very much low-hanging fruit, because they can hit, two goals with one stone, basically.
I love that phrase and never thought about it in that way. Women in the corporate board level being low-hanging fruit. It's almost like a duh, hello, when it comes to compliance. Certainly you want a perspective that's going to be more, and because diverse is not the going word nowadays, but at least a perspective that is broad. That's a great way. I was going to say global, broad, expanded, enlightened, maybe not woke, but enlightened.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, most definitely. I would say the word broad resonates really a lot with what we do, because what happens more often than not these days, boards are really stuck in terms of their succession planning and talent pipelines on ex-CFO roles with financial background and COOs with operational backgrounds, right? And that's pretty much it. And this does not give us the view and the quality of the oversight that's necessary. Because if you think about financial statements, Well, this is a very like classic slash original thinking about that when corporate governance just came into being. And there was a very big focus, given all of those big scandals like Enron and WorldCom. All of that was connected to financial misconduct, right? There was a lot of fraud and people stealing from the company and, booking some silly stuff on the financial statements that never happened and, funneling out the money. So there was a serious focus on financial misconduct. And that meant that if you thought about having a good and effective board, you would eventually end up with people who had financial role in the past, right? And it all played out nicely. But what's happening today and what is different is that a lot of things now happen and exist outside of the financial statements, right? So GAAP, the generally acceptable accounting principles, which is a standard uh, for financial accounting in this country, has not evolved enough to cover certain important things like geopolitics, like
Hmm.
ESG, sustainability, diversity, social issues, right? So all of that has a lot of impact on the company and what it does and how it feels, and specifically on the goodwill and the brand power, et cetera, et cetera. But it is not factored in the financial statements, right? So what happens if we only have that kind of talent on boards? That means that we are deliberately reducing the quality of the oversight, and we're leaving it like to a chance, or that the board directors are kind of have an interest in that topic, and maybe they have read something, and maybe they did some self-education on those topics, which is not guaranteed, right? Because again,
Right.
they are coming in with a certain lens.
I really want to know, how did you get into this niche? It's definitely a need that was something that needs to be called for attention by what you're saying. We need this lens, we need this focus, we need to broaden it being outside of finance. But was there something in your professional background or experiences or mentors that really led you towards being so convicted and making sure that that kind of representation is in the type of board diversity?
That's a great question, which invites a very long answer. Because I think the whole my career actually led me to this, right? So I've been hanging out in ethics and compliance in various roles in-house and independently for almost 20 years. And I was an internal auditor for some time. I combined internal auditing with compliance, and then I shifted my focus to ethics and more to like moral philosophy and good judgment and culture and everything else. And basically, I would say that everything everything counted towards this role that I have today, because everything comes back to governance, if we whether we want it or we don't, right? Because governance is about decision making. Governance is about steering and the direction and trajectory of the company. Governance is about strategy, and governance is about future, right? So I've been hearing for all these 20 years how backward looking compliance is. And this is a fair criticism. And I thought, you know what? For us to be a lot more forward looking, we need to have a seat in the governance process, because what happens more often than not, we just don't know about all of those forward-looking discussions about strategic objectives. We're just not there, and that makes us very much backward-looking, and that does not allow us to bring that important ethical lens at the moment when decisions are taken, because typically what would happen is that ethics and compliance folks will be invited to the boardrooms to put out the fires. Yes, so there's a scandal connected to some kind of an activist or whistleblower or I don't know what, someone discovering some interesting information about misconduct on certain level of the company, and then people would say, oh yeah, let's have a chief compliance officer join us and help us put everything back to normality.
But
um
that's not necessarily the CEO. I mean, part of what some of the things that you sent us to look through, which I really, really appreciate because your perspective is so global. The thing about having women sit in the primary seat of CEO. Some of the steps towards that, and I have this little diagram in front of me of, the rungs for the guys are like, it's easy, but the rungs for her are like all these gaps are in there. And one of the things from this article that they said is the reason why so few women are actually getting to CEO seat. They're in the C-suite, but they're not CEO. And the reason for that is because they don't have the financial P&L experience that they think, I think this is where you were going, that they think that the CEO should have. But my feeling, and then I'll let you definitely take the ball on this, is what we're losing as a result of that is we're pinpointing this one space, but we're losing that whole idea that you just brought up about forward-looking strategy. The strengths of the company really live in that broader perspective that a woman brings to the table through her experience, not just because she's a woman, but that helps, but her experience, her way of looking at things a little bit differently, and certainly outside of the norm. I keep seeing that in all of these articles, that outside of the norm, what's expected, how we did it before, this whole looking back, we did it this way, so we keep doing it that way. That doesn't bring on any innovation. It doesn't bring on any perspective that takes us into a new realm. I got a little long-winded there.
No, you were good. I think that was very valuable. Yeah, there is a paradigm and a myth that the best CEO is made of an ex CFO, and that myth is still kicking. So I would say these days, although we basically see quite often how that approach can backfire, and a very good example would be Boeing, because we know that CEO. At least one of them at a certain point of time in history of the company was coming from a financial background, and the only focus for that guy was actually reducing the cost and focusing on the P&L. And all of that basically led to Boeing as an engineering marvel being dismantled, just as the glue together production site or company or whatever you might call it, because everything has been outsourced and offshored with reducing the costs tagline at the center and in the focus, right? So this is what actually happened, and we see the very tragic, very dramatic consequences of that nowadays, right? And there was a crash a couple of weeks ago in India and everything, right? And the door which blew out of the plane last year was very crazy, I would say.
I think, Vera, we're on a roll here with this idea because, we look at bringing, this whole thing about diversity and taking diversity away, and, immediately women and people of color and the LGBTQ community plus gets left out. But that's such a simplistic way of looking at it. What gets left out is the breadth of the communities that these businesses serve. Mm-hmm. That's what gets left out. And when it comes to compliance, being able to make sure that the people at the top are bringing compliance to the table, I think they go hand in hand, because when you forget about the breadth of the community, the people that you serve, the people that buy your products, the people that look at your movies, the people, whatever it is, when you start excluding them from the process because you want to make money, you're losing money. It's such a myopic way and small-minded way of looking at business today. I mean, we're already beginning to see how we're losing money as a result of just being so myopic in the way that we help people live their lives through these companies' lenses.
Well,
Don't you think?
I think this too is something that you've done a deep dive on, about when it comes to the ethics behind a company and representing your customers or representing the people that work for you. It's like, do you stick with your point of view, the brand's point of view, and disregard the other people that you could include from the community into your brand? Or do you focus on every little person to make sure that the company is representative of the whole?
Yeah. While you were speaking, I was thinking about Barbie movie and the moment when they kind of have a discussion. I don't necessarily recall it in very much detail, but they kind of discuss that they're gonna see the board and probably these are all wonderful women, looking great and very smart and talented. And then she enters the boardroom and there is no single woman on the board and there are only white old men sitting there and making decisions about Barbie and how the doll for the girls or boys or whatever should look like, right? So that kind of gave me that idea. And yes, it drills down to the representation of the customer base, it drills down to the representation of the community. It is very intuitive to have some kind of representation, exactly as you say, because otherwise, how do you even have a good strategy? How do you even know what that community and that customer base actually wants? Right? How do you even an intelligent guess into that? Because you might be thinking in a very different way in terms of their needs and wants, right? And you might not be hitting any kind of good strategic objective here just
Right.
because you have absolutely no clue what they want or need, right? So I think it makes a perfect business case. It makes a perfect ethical case. From whatever angle I look, I would say this is just a no-brainer idea. And maybe shifting a little bit to what we see currently with the new administration at the steering wheel, I would probably provide some note of reassurance because, well, at least from what I see, and of course, California, where I'm based, is not an average state, and yeah, California is special
Mhm.
in many
Mhm.
regards. Uh, and but at least what I see here, when I speak to the board members, which I do quite regularly, they get the idea, right? So they get it. Uh,
Mhm.
um, that's why I wouldn't say they necessarily walk back from all of the diversity targets. I think that's why we see a lot of reframing and that belonging and everything else, right? So uh, somehow trying to maybe not have the word diversity or
Diversity.
DEI front and center, but instead continue the underlying work. Still
The
continue.
strategy. The
Yeah, yeah,
strategy.
yeah. And I would probably say that all of the responses of the companies to the current ESG and diversity backlash, I put companies based on their response in three buckets. The first bucket would be those who indeed walk back and indeed roll back everything. And that probably signals that their pledges and goals were so unachievable in the first place that they're very happy with the
Huh?
opportunity to say like,
Yeah.
hey, no, we don't have to do that. Yeah, right.
No, we don't have to.
Yeah, so this is number one. Number two is exactly what I just said. Companies trying to reframe uh, how that looks in the public eye, but still continue to do the good work inside of the company. And I can probably call it some form of greenwashing as opposed to greenwashing, right? Greenwashing was exactly connected to the first bucket. Those companies who did the greenwash and they tried to present themselves as green, whereas they were not. And that was only like PR deep commitment. These companies are trying to do quite the opposite without inviting any kind of um, attention from the public. They're quietly doing the good work. And there's a third bucket with the companies who resist very actively. And this proxy season, there has been a lot of activists coming to boards and coming to shareholder meetings and trying to float the anti-ESG and anti-DI proposals. And there were several very notable examples of companies like Coca-Cola and Levi Strauss and some others, and Berkshire Hathaway, by the way, too, which rejected those proposals overwhelmingly. So those proposals only gained 1 or 2% support. That means that 98 to 99% voted against anti-DEI proposals in these companies. So this is like a very active and very publicly visible resistance. So I think we're not in a very bad place, so to say. Of course, companies that sit on government contracts is a separate group because
It's
they
a reality. Yeah.
because they were instructed and they were ordered to change how they see this problematic, right? And if they still would like to have that government contract, and many of them, of course, do, um, they had to, right? So this is a separate group, but companies not tied to that, I think they still have a lot of freedom to decide what they stand for, and if they decide that they stand for it, stand for it.
I'm so happy that you gave that perspective because I know that things have settled down in a lot of ways. And there's still people who are a little freaked out about the whole process being lost and what happened. So I'm so glad that you put it into 1, 2, 3 because it makes it easy for us to see. And even the examples of the companies that you gave, I had no idea a couple of those would be on that list. I do know that I was at not a conference, it was an event. It was a gay pride event at JP Morgan here in Washington, D.C. a couple of weeks ago. And they stand committed to their diverse workforce and their diverse customer. They stand committed because those customers make a difference for them. It's interesting, though, everyone that was presenting that day, and that's what we do. We prep people for presentations and main stage and all that good stuff, media, podcasts. I looked at that, and though I wasn't sad about the presenters, there was not one woman C-suite speaker, not one. And I love what JP Morgan did. Yay, hoo, ain't mad at you. I would just love for us to begin to see more and more of a conversation. Now, the person behind the whole event was a woman, but I would have loved for her to have been a C-suite executive and bringing that information to the table. And again, I'm saying not just because we're women. Yes, we're women and we bring a perspective that's very broad. I love that word. Maybe we should call it BEI. BEI. It's broad, but because we tend to and I want to get back to compliance because I know that's a big piece for you. We tend to bring to the table just a cacophony, I love that word, of experiences because of the nature of who we are, because we've had to, because the rungs on our little ladder are not so well put together. We've had to find our way, zigzag, 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 a couple of falls here and there, a couple of ways of feeling ourselves not being good enough, and I hope we start getting over that. I mean, this imposter syndrome stuff. But you know what I'm saying? Those experiences are what we bring to this table. The cacophony that I'm talking about are experiences that women have to have in order to get where they're going.
Yeah.
Don't get me started.
I would agree. I think I don't have a data-driven insight on that, but I have a feeling that it might be that women CVs are more eclectic than men's. It might well be. Going back to the cacophony. But I do have some data on, for example, the new directors and how many of them were women last year. So in 2024, 42% of new corporate directors at S&P 500 companies in this country were actually women. New directors joining boards, 42%, which is not bad, I guess, right? It's almost a half, which is not bad.
Almost half.
Yeah. So we will see how this dynamic changes this year. It's going to be interesting to see the figures for this year. But what I saw already is that somewhere around March, I think Bloomberg issued their research saying that women and men of non-white men together combined finally outweigh 50.2%, I think, so barely.
Wow.
The
Yeah.
white man on S&P boards. All right, so it's basically, I think, a bit pretentious to say outweigh when you have 50.2%, but I would say there's a parity, right? There is a parity, but that's not only women, that's women combined with non-white men. But anyway, I think some progress has been made, and one of the key things that needs to happen for this progress to continue is a very focused and intentional look at succession planning. Succession planning happens for CEOs. Succession planning happens for board members, right? The better we are on the people who are considered for succession, the better we are at building talent pipelines, the better we are on casting a wider net
I love it.
around the company, and not only saying like, okay, so we have COO, CFO, and somebody else, these are three basic candidates, and that's it, we're done with our succession planning, which is basically a very typical case of how this goes, right? We need to rethink how we do that process. We need to make sure that that process is dynamic in time and in casting a wider net and consideration of many not so called unusual suspects. So the more we drill into the company, the better we will be at selecting candidates that actually make a difference, but might be not considered if we are too bureaucratic and formalistic, if we only do
Yeah.
it as a formality, because
Yeah.
we have in our charter that we as a board need to do the succession planning. Okay, let's just compile this paper, check the box, that's it, we're done, right? No,
Hmm.
Yeah.
this process needs to be ongoing. This process needs to be normalized, because a lot of things that go wrong with succession planning is that it's emotionally uncomfortable. Think
Yeah.
about it. Think about it.
Int-
You have a new CEO, right? The basic horizon, the typical horizon for succession planning is 5 years, 3 to 5. The basic term of a CEO is 3 to 5. So we're arriving at a situation when, on the first day on the job for a CEO, the board says, well, okay, welcome. And let's now drill down into what's going to happen when you're out of here, right? Who is going to succeed you, right? So this is a bit counterintuitive, and this is very uncomfortable for the boards to come forward with that, because, well, I mean, that's a different, that they are afraid that this is going to ruin the vibe, right? Although should although it shouldn't. And
Yeah.
the board needs to have a responsibility for normalizing the succession discussions with the CEO and with the executive suite, normalizing this process as something which is essential for the long-term success of the company, depersonalizing the whole process, which is very important. And if we have that ongoing discussion, and if we have a chief HR officer, for example, involved and bringing us all the information about, high potentials, maybe a couple levels down from the executive suite, in this way, we will be able to cast a wider net and see potential candidates of all diverse backgrounds, all the stars and the unusual suspects, and make sure we're not excluding them from the succession planning.
That's what I was going to ask you, is what roles need to happen on boards, or what specific governance do we need to implement in order to make sure that it's not just safe hires or following that CFO to CEO, but you're saying having a chairperson step up. And really too, we talk a lot about men needing to be allies to women and other diverse groups, but what is the steps that a board could take to flip that focus and be better at casting that wider net?
I love that. Love that phrase too.
Well, boards think it is a very good moment for boards actually to rethink what they do and what they should be doing in the longer term. First of all, let's say that views on corporate governance are a little bit different uh, uh, based on where you find yourself in the world. Right? So corporate governance and the interpretation of corporate governance will vary across the globe, right? So what I see here in the US, and I might be silly because I have spent not much time here. It's my second year, so I might say something silly now. But my impression compared to what I see in other jurisdictions and in other countries is that boards here tend to be a lot more focused on procedural stuff.
Interesting.
There's a little bit less focus on judgment, and there is a little bit more rigid line. They would always say and bring up that phrase, nose in, fingers out, meaning that this is not our job, right? So many
So
things that,
procedural, you mean
Checking the box.
dive it deeper there for us.
yeah, sure. So by procedural, I mean we need to have a number of committees. So these are the committees that required by law. We're going to have those committees, and we should have a chair, so let's appoint a chair, and we should have a charter, so let's put down the charter, and we should have 8 meetings per year, let's have 8 meetings per year, and let's make sure we're ticking all of those procedural boxes, and there's no problem with that, right? So and then when it comes to actual responsibilities, so we're supposed to have an oversight, and we should not be like involved into day-to-day decisions of the management. So let's not do that, and let's keep our fingers out and nose in, and whatever stands for that saying we hear on a daily basis, right? So I actually think that this is some kind of a, very comfortable defense that nose in, fingers out, because it provides boards here with a lot of opportunity to get away from important things and important discussions.
You're
Because
not making a true commitment.
Yeah,
It's not a
yeah.
commitment.
We're
And
just
it doesn't
It's just a board seat.
it's just checking the dots. But
Yeah.
I love the way that you explain that. And what you inspired in me to say is it doesn't create dynamics for innovation. And a company has to have, I feel, at the basis of who they are, there has to be that crackling, passionate innovation. And if at your leadership level, you're just checking boxes and getting paid, which is what I think comes to what you were saying earlier about all of a sudden money's getting misappropriated and blah, blah, blah. Because the mindset is all about getting paid, taking care of the shareholders, and not really looking at what's crackling underneath our company. What is the innovation that we're inspiring by looking outside of the box? I mean, we've talked years about outside the box. We've talked years about sustainability. I can't believe that here we are. I mean, I can remember when sustainability was like the first things people would say. I mean, people were not talking about sustainability in the early 2000s, but that's when we started talking about it. And it's interesting, a lot of sustainability from the clients that I was working with. I was doing a lot of crisis communication around sustainability because these companies were getting bitten on their toes because they were not being compliant, sweatshops, all of that stuff, because they were not looking at the ultimate goal was how are we helping the people that help us serve the people we sell to.
Yeah,
I guess I'm getting a little passionate here.
yeah, definitely, and that's a good thing. Agree, but let me get back to Denise's question on how boards can get more involved and do better on selecting the candidates and helping with diversifying the boardroom. So one thing that I already said is rethinking the role, and together with that, being a little bit more accessible and having a little bit more input from the company would be really nice. And what I mean by that, there are wonderful programs that do not exist in the US yet, but they do exist in some other countries. For example, board apprenticeships. So a board apprenticeship is basically a very straightforward idea. So we talk to HR, we'll look at high potentials, maybe one level down, executive team and the executive team, or maybe two levels down, depending on the organization and how big it is. And we identify people interested to join board in the future, and we put them on boards as observers for 12 to 18 months.
I
They
love that.
need to come to all of the board meetings. They need to provide an input when they are asked for that input. They do not vote. So formally, they are not board members and they do not have a seat, but they observe and they learn and contribute. And this is
Yeah.
a no-brainer for boards and for folks who would like to join them, because boards get the input they do not currently have. If the boards are smart enough, they will look at at their composition, and they would choose a high potential as an apprentice in the area which is not covered, right?
Mhm.
Very
Yeah.
straightforward, right? So if we don't have anybody from ethics and compliance or risk, let's have a high potential and apprentice from that area, and let's see
Yeah.
how that changes the dynamic of our discussions here. And it is
I
also,
think that
yeah,
makes sense.
That makes a
yeah,
lot of
it
sense.
makes a lot
I
of
mean,
sense.
I say even I feel like the board is so elusive
Mhm.
that some people, even that might be, like you're saying, high potential or really successful within their careers, they think the cap is the C-suite. They don't think that there's anything else that they can aspire to participate in or really add value to. And it makes me think, going back in my career, I had the opportunity as an intern to sit on board meetings at a university from the athletics department point of view when they were talking about compliance and governance with the school for everything, but particularly during football season, which was so cool to see. But having that opportunity when I was younger gave me insights to all the ins and outs of how the university as a whole ran, which was just, it's necessary, not just for the boards to get different perspective, not just for the corporation to get a different perspective, but for younger people that are looking to grow in their careers and learn and see how the world works. Being able to have that apprenticeship, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, that's a great way to to have a better perspective on your career and your
Mhm.
path, and how, again, as you said, to connect the dots and see how everything is operating. This is a great opportunity to learn and inform your career choices in the future,
So
right?
you
So
said it's not here yet, but are you leading this charge of bringing it to us?
Yeah, come on, Vera.
we would really love to, but and we're in discussions. We're having good discussions about that with the NACD, the National Association of Corporate Directors, for example, and with some other folks, the Private Directors Association. We're having discussions with 50-50 women on boards around that topic too, and they're very active here in California. So yeah, we're pushing on that idea, but what really changed the status quo with this, for example, in the UK, was the fact that the UK government codified that. They didn't do it in a form of a mandatory requirement, but they issued a guideline saying, hey, companies, if you would like to rethink your boards, maybe you should try this. And that really changed the dynamic, because, well, I mean, it's a very obvious thought that whenever a regulator comes in and says, like, hey, look here, well, companies are going to look there, right? So that was really important, because it directed the company's attention to that focal point. And after that, the apprenticeship just got to another level, because before that, that was like a practice not really well known by many, and only like a handful of companies were experimenting with that. But with the regulator, with the government stepping in and saying, hey, we think this is a good thing, more companies came in, and more companies volunteered to be inside of that initiative and have actual apprenticeships.
Mhm.
And that really moved
Interesting.
the needle. So if we can reach the regulator here by saying, hey, this is a beautiful thing, and probably American boards need to try it too and see what happens. That would be great.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how, if there's an appetite for that, maybe not in these 4 years, but keep pushing, because it is true. And I think that's the interesting part about the focus when it comes to DEI and diversity. It's such a narrow view to really focus on, like, to get rid of DE and I. That doesn't, it's just so narrow minded, when I don't think that's the real focus. So it's like, I do see, and I'm happy to hear that you're like, some of the climate isn't really focused on that. There is a shift, and they're wanting to find a way to keep what we have, but just maybe checking the boxes in a different way or calling it something else. But I think there's so many things I want to ask, but I want to dive into more with you. What are you working on, and what is really giving you hope right now in this space, where for some people, if they feel like we're going backwards in time, what are you working on, and what are you doing that is giving us and you some hope?
Vera, before you answer that, because this is juicy, before you answer that, one thing I do want to say is you said earlier there is some hope, and I think this idea of shutting it down, especially in the governmental space, it's sending us all back to the table to look at the concept again, because the concept got myopic. And now, especially for those companies that decided, no, we're not doing that. We're going to stay the course. Then the ones who are kind of in the middle, and then those that acquiesced, it's giving us a chance to go back and take a look. And I, quite frankly, would prefer that we stir the pot during this 4 years. Let's make a good soup. Let's make one that's going to be better, lasting, more focused, more, not generic, but more expansive. I mean, don't you think? And I kind of am lumping Nia's question in there too.
Yeah. Well, this is all great. I agree with the soup completely. I would say that at least part of the backlash is actually based on something, right? And it's actually based on the fact that not all of the ideas worked out, or at least did not work out as supposed to, right? So it is indeed a time for reflection and regrouping and thinking about the things which did not work, and how can we all together make sure they do work out in the future, right? So I'm not losing hope, not even close to that. I'm absolutely hopeful. I speak to so many brilliant individuals these days. This new role at Boards of the Future gave me access to wonderful people. And I speak to board directors, and I speak to investors and all sorts of PE funds and venture capitalists and angel investors. Yes, in different shapes and colors here in the Bay Area, in the Los Angeles area. I speak a lot with my compliance and ethics and risk colleagues. I sit on a global forum for governance, performance, and risk at the Association of Certified Chartered Accountants. So I kind of see what's going on in the accounting world too. So, and speaking to all of those brilliant minds and individuals gives me on one central idea that the change is actually imminent, because there are people who get it. And what needs to happen is just that we come together in an intentional movement and finally move that needle, push for that, right? So, but I'm absolutely convinced that the change is imminent, because I just feel it from the ground. I have the intelligence, so to say, by speaking to various groups of people here and across the Atlantic, and I know that the change is imminent.
Yeah. And that's what I've just been feeling about the nature of our administration this time around. We chose this path, but this path had to be chosen in order for us to really weed out what was going on, everything that was bubbling under the surface. And I love that you have the perspective of being in LA specifically. There's so much happening there, but also being abroad, you really do get both perspectives of what's going on in the United States. And we really had to bring all those bubbles, unfortunately, to the surface, because like you're saying, we were in a space where we're like, no, we got to check this box. We got to do it this way. This is who we are as
Mhm.
America. This is who we are as leaders. Do it like this. And change
Change
had
is
to
good.
happen. Clearly, people were unhappy about it.
Yeah.
But how can we move forward in a collective where everyone is getting to, because in America, we love our rights to speak freely about what we need and what we want. How can everybody kind of play in a safe space, I think I would say.
I think intentional is a big word.
Yeah,
I mean, I have to admit, Vera, you're so inspiring me today. That word intentional, intentional. We were checking the boxes. We were not being intentional. And granted, there are many women who are listening right now who made it where they are, women of color, women, white women who made it where they are because of those check boxes. However, we're seeing, and I'm going to throw that word in there, that checking the box is not sustainable. It's not sustainable. So I love this whole idea that one, change is imminent, and two, that we go back to the table, stirring that soup again with intentionality.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that, Vera.
I mean, there's just so much juicy conversations, but I do want to kind of bring it back to our mission here at Women Express. We spend a lot of time putting together leadership summits for women. And these women are maybe mid-career or already in leadership positions, but I want to pose the question to you. You have the boots on the ground. What can the everyday woman or the Women Express community that is listening, what can women do today to begin claiming or reclaiming her voice, her role in leadership and in governance, or how can she pave that way forward if that's where she wants to head?
Intentionally.
Yeah, very intentionally. I would say if you would like to join a board at some point, make sure that people know about it. That's a very obvious idea, but it's lacking in so many cases that HR or executives just don't know that that woman or that person wants to be on board. So if this is the case for you and you would like to land on a board, the earlier you say that, the better. Because what happens with all of those HR career pathways and high potential assessments and everything else, well, there is a certain file about you, and there's gonna be a certain pre-designed career pathway as HR department based on your assessments and your performance sees the best for you. So if they don't have the information that you would like to end up on a board, that pre-designed career path might look differently. Okay? So you need to make sure that you provide that input and see what happens.
Yeah.
And see what
Advocate,
happens. Because when you have this
advocating for
conversation,
yourself.
just advocate for yourself. And, when you have a conversation during your assessment, you just throw it at them and see what happens, how they react, what they say. Right. And it's also a good input into your career planning, because depending on how that lands and how they respond, you can make an idea if this is the right place of work for you or not. It also will inform how you move from there.
Yes.
I like that.
Yes, I love that.
That's important too.
Standing who you are. I mean, a lot of these workshops we're doing, we're saying, okay, what do you bring to the table? What is it? What's your brand? Your personal brand? Because you can always, it's checking the box. I send in the resume. I send in the CV. I do this and I had this experience. But what in between the lines do you bring to the table that could be juicy, that could be expressive, that could be, bring that passion and intention that we're talking about? Don't be afraid to talk about the things that are the glue of your experience, not just your experience.
Yeah, and you might not even know what experiences you need unless you advocate for yourself and see if it's a fit, or ask, where is there a fit? That's going back to that apprenticeship. If you didn't have the opportunity to sit there and observe, or sit there and ask questions, or just sit, have a seat at the table, which is the fun thing to say. It's such a weird kind of analogy, but yeah, you just don't know what you don't speak up for. You got to ask, you got to show up.
Yeah, yeah, and maybe a couple of other things that are really important is curiosity. For women or for men, doesn't matter. I would say it's important for any kind of professional development and growing in your career, being curious and being having that humility that I still do not know anything about it, but I gotta learn, and I will ask good questions. I will, talk to people around me. I will find a way to find out more about that topic if this is something that makes me curious, which is very helpful in progressing towards the leadership roles, because HR departments and leaders themselves really much appreciate this trait as indeed potential for learning,
Yeah.
for growth.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's such a
Uh,
great point. I'm always saying that you're never done learning in life. There should never be a cap to what you know, because you never know
I love the
everything.
apprenticeship thing. I love the apprenticeship thing. So if I could put three key things to walk away with, I love the intentional. I love the apprenticeship. And what
Mhm.
would be the last one?
Advocating for yourself is what I'm hearing.
yeah,
Just
yeah,
advocate, ask questions, be curious, and be intentional about your curiosity.
yeah. Wonderful. That's beautiful.
Uh,
I think you were supposed to, but this was just such a juicy conversation, Vera. No, I just didn't know we were heading in this direction.
I know.
And I think that those who are going to be listening to this definitely take this and give it to your girlfriends, give it to the women in your
Yeah.
workplace, give
Yeah.
it to give it to the men in your workplace,
Yes.
because there's such juicy, good information that I think, Vera, you really inspired in this conversation. And I think this is a must have in
Mhm.
if you're going to have podcasts, this is a must have in your podcast library.
Especially for our women at Women Express.
Yeah. We're a little bit, we're a wee bit, you know.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It was really wonderful. I had so much fun. You guys had wonderful questions, practical, relevant. That was a wonderful conversation. I thoroughly
Yeah.
enjoyed this.
Really was.
Yeah.
Let's promise to stay in touch with each other,
Yeah.
because I think there's a lot more. I want us to stay in that soup, because
Mhm.
I love your eye and that you're out there stirring it, and we would love to be a part of that soup. So any place you think you can incorporate us into that experience, we're more than happy to be there for it and you and for us.
Yeah.